All right, we're going to get started in just a minute, everyone. Okay, and while people are filtering in, I'll just go over some light housekeeping here. We are in a Zoom webinar tonight, so we will not see or hear you, those of you in the audience, but we do welcome you to put any questions you might have in the chat at the bottom of your screen. If you shake the mouse, you should see that speech bubble down there, and we'll keep an eye on that for any of your questions. Okay, and I'm Erin Driscoll. I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Wilmington Memorial Library. I would like to thank our neighboring libraries in Andover, Chelmsford, and Tewksbury for joining us and helping us to promote this event this evening. I'm so excited to be hosting Ben Shattuck. He is a former teaching writing fellow and graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, a recipient of the Penn Robert J. Dau Short Story Prize and a 2019 Pushcart Prize. He is the director of the Cuttyhunk Island Writers Residency and curator of the D.D. Shattuck Gallery. And you can find his writing in places such as the Harvard Review, the Common, the Paris Review Daily, Lit Hub, Kinfolk Magazine, and of course, he is the author of the new book, 6 Walks in the Footsteps of Henry David Thoreau. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you so much.
And I know you were going to share with us a couple readings to get started from your new book, 6 Walks.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Here's the book. I couldn't be in a more Thoreauvian setting. I'm outside because the baby is sleeping inside. So I hope there's no, the wind is okay. And I don't have to duck in to plug in the computer at some point. But these are the days of Zoom. Where am I going to start? This reading series is, am I right? It's off the beaten path. Is that what you said? Yeah. And so I thought I'd read a section of a formerly off the beaten path, now fully on the beaten path. This is my time visiting Walden Pond. This is a section about my time visiting Walden Pond for the first time. This reading is 4 minutes, so I'm going to do 3 readings. They're all like 3 or 4 minutes each, and then we can go to question and answer. Okay, this is interlude 2. It's between the 3rd and 4th walk, the 2nd and 3rd walk. I'd never visited Walden Pond, so on a hot day in August, a couple months after hiking Mount Katahdin, I drove up to see the most famous pond in America. A replica of Henry's cabin near the parking lot was smaller than I expected, and it took some imagination to believe that this site was once tranquil, now with the sound of nearby traffic and families heading to the pond. I walked into the replica cabin, sat in a replica rocking chair beside a replica wood stove. I was hollow-eyed then, staring at nothing or at the floor. Those were the days of antibiotics and Lyme disease, which had only worsened since I started the walks. I had a beard then too, and long hair, because I'd given up shaving or getting haircuts under the dulling effects of bad health has on grooming. Still, I was surprised when a woman and her little son walked through the door, stopped, and she said to him, "Oh, look, there he is." I've always dressed traditionally, I suppose. Most of my pants are black cotton and my shirts are button-downs. I wear boots or clogs. "Ask him a question," she said to the boy, pushing him forward toward the Thoreau reenactor she thought I was. I considered if I should try to drum up a line about growing beans or civil disobedience for the little boy, who was now walking hesitantly across the creaking wooden floor, but my mind was so tired then. I held up a hand. I just said no, smiling. I stood, patted down my pants. I skirted past the boy, strode out of the cabin, toward the pond where Henry had gone skinny dipping. Maybe my leaving was in character, I thought, when I turned back to see the woman give me a look like, what the hell? The pond was cerulean cellophane that day. The trees around its rim swayed in the midsummer wind. I sat in the sand watching swallows picking at the surface, drinking and then trying to snatch up a white feather. To my side, an elderly man in a bathing suit was using a walker to make his way toward the water. He was alone. He moved slowly and it looked painfully, taking a few seconds to pause after each step. He'd then lift his walker, move it half a foot forward, step, lift his walker, move it forward, and then step again. There are some things you know you'll never see again, like a man shuffling into a pond with a walker, the waterline inching up his tight grip on the handles. He then fell back into the lap of the water. It was as close to watching somebody fly as I'll likely ever see. He then stretched out, his arms winged out, his toes surfaced. Above him, the swallows kept swooping. His arms lifted overhead and he backpedaled toward the center of Walden Pond, moving much more swiftly than he had when gravity was holding him down. He left his walker there. I wrote in my journal the words husk and shed, unshackled and clipped. I then took off my shirt, my shoes, my socks, and my pants, down to my boxers. I walked into the water, past the man's walker. Little khaki-colored fish, the sizes of the alewives I'd seen in Wellfleet, were weaving around the walker's metal legs. I swam out to where the pond was 10 or 15 feet below. I admired how clear it was. I held my breath, and then I let it all out. I sank and the air bubbles licked up my face. I opened my eyes to see blurry shafts of sunlight skewering the water above me. My lungs burned, but it felt good, because the deeper I went, the less my lime-pinched joints hurt. My feet touched the bottom then. I stood there, my ears pressured, my joints relieved. In the pond where Henry went skinny dipping most mornings. How quiet it was down there on the floor of Walden Pond. Thank you. This is a book is a real 2-for-1 deal. Here's the drawings. I did drawings with the book, and Aaron, also you are muted if you are saying something to me at all.
Yes, sorry,
That's okay.
I said wonderful, and then I realized I was muted.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying to do a little bit of lip reading. Okay, I will read something from one of the first walks, well, the very first walk I took, and something that people ask is, why did you decide to do this? These walks through New England in areas that aren't so maybe naturally beautiful as they were in the 19th century. And this project came about really organically. There wasn't a book proposal or anything. I just started taking the walks, and I can talk more about each of the walks and what they meant to me. But something that's really important to remember that I had to remind myself of, I didn't set out to do 6 walks. I set out to do 1 walk, and that was, I wanted to follow Henry up Cape Cod to sort of escape the pressures, bad health, low point darkness in my life at the time. And if that walk on Cape Cod hadn't offered so many weird, beautiful, unexpected, really singular experiences, I wouldn't have done the 2nd walk. And then I wouldn't have done the 3rd. And it was like petals on a flower just unfolding. And then it bloomed into the book that is this. So this is from the Cape Cod walk, and I just took little notes as I was doing these walks. This is about a minute of reading, and the only thing you should know is that I had left that morning because I had horrible insomnia and nightmares, which is why I woke up before dawn and just drove from my house about an hour to the base of Cape Cod and started walking eventually 20 miles through the sand with no plan, just knocked on a door and asked to spend the night as Henry had, and made it to Provincetown days later. But Yeah, here we go. I walked for over an hour before I saw another person. It was a bird watcher with his telescope set up in the middle of the beach. This was near Wellfleet. We talked dead loons, northern gannets, and which shorebirds were migrating. Even with the long pauses of strangers meeting, I was so happy for the distraction, as it momentarily halted the conveyor belt of sadness that the dream that night before was still moving through me. I'd rather dream of the bizarre ships sent from my subconscious, the ones floating on waves of anxiety or fear, dreams of, for instance, two-headed snakes, or of my teeth going soft, of my house filled with small, sharp-toothed rodents. I'd rather these puzzles, these images to be interpreted and distanced by measure of analysis and rephrased for the day. But what I'd gotten the previous night was different. It was an image of a real person put in the material textures of my day. It was more like an experience, more like a memory and not a puzzle floating on anything, just a cold dunk in the sea itself. And so that was why I was now clinging to the bird watcher, thrashing at him with questions about the migratory routes of loons. The bird watcher, clearly just wanting to end the conversation, wished me well, folded up his telescope, and left to find some shorebirds he was searching for. I sat in the sand, and to distract myself further, I took out my journal and wrote some synonyms for the wind. Cloud river, I wrote. Weather's yeast, season's traitor, colonial fuel. This was a word game I assigned my freshman college students one day years earlier, when I'd finished teaching the lesson plan, but I still had 15 minutes before the end of the period. Look out the window, I'd said, and write the longest list of synonyms for anything you can out there. Sitting at my desk 10 minutes later, listening to these students read their lists aloud, I was unexpectedly moved, entranced maybe. This renaming of nature, these many words for an oak tree, or the clouds, or the sky, or the Iowa River, they all sounded like prayers to me, like worship. I think everyone in the classroom felt it, because we all entered the silence you feel in a church or a theater. The spell was broken when a boy started his list with worm shit. Dirt, I said. The earth, he said. And so now I sat in the sand and wrote hurricane muscle, summer's respite, crying scapegoat, the wind. Thanks. I'll read one more and then let's, have a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. This is from Wachusett, which is the third walk, the last walk of the first section. The book is very divided into sections. It's the only way I can seemingly write, by giving myself small assignments. So it's anyway. This is the last section, and there's two important things to know. This is just a minute and a half of reading, but earlier on my walk up Wachusett, I had run into a family, and the two boys of that family and I sat and watched a porcupine, which they kept calling a porcupine, walk out of the woods and eat a flower. And they were both totally amazed by it, as anyone should be if you see a porcupine. And I name a lot of the people who I'd met on the walks at the end of this section. And I guess the other important thing is because I was frustrated with not feeling any sort of transcendental enlightenment with my relation to nature up until that point, I had taken MDMA, which is a drug. Ecstasy is another word for it. It's a drug that makes you feel, I don't know, euphoria and love for the world. That didn't really work out in this walk, but I did come across one of my favorite Thoreau quotes, and that was about his own drug experience when he was getting his tooth pulled. And I just have to read it because it shows that what a master Thoreau is of the written experience. So this is what Thoreau said. By taking ether the other day, I was convinced how far asunder a man could be separated from his senses. You expand like a seed in the ground. You exist in your roots like a tree in the winter. If you have an inclination to travel, take ether and you will go beyond the farthest star, which is just very beautiful. And that's the great thing about writing in the shadow of Henry David Thoreau. Like, I'm just never going to write anything better than that. So it's like, all bets are, you just, pressure's off. Okay, so this is a page. Before sleeping on Wachusett Mountain, Henry also looked up at the stars, and he also found comfort. It was satisfaction to know that there were fellow travelers still, he wrote, as high and as out of reach as our own destiny. Truly the stars were given for a consolation to us. Henry had walked to Wachusett, had sat up on the summit and looked at the stars as if they were given for consolation 6 months after his brother died. So was he doing the same thing I was doing, walking to husk the dead skin of grief, looking up to feel the comfort of one's own smallness in our world, to displace bulging selfhood under the shadow of such urgent beauty as the night sky, to force your loss and confusion microscopic in perspective? I spread myself on the snowless hill, and I heard in my drug-slippery head, I've never seen a porcupine. It came like a chant, I've never seen a porcupine. I wondered then if the porcupine was asleep, and what dreams she might be having. And if the boy was asleep, and his family dog, and my parents, and Mary, and Dora, and the goldfish on top of Wachusett Mountain, and Randy, and Pat, and Wellfleet. What weird worlds they were all inhabiting in their dreams, tortured or hopeful, or anxious or in love, but all completely alone. And then I saw it, that a large portion of the world just then was simply held in their imaginations, billions of animals suspended in hallucinations, in some place between memory and thought. These hours that we named sleep, this necessary dark territory that we enter alone. It's a more startling spell than I can describe. Thank you. And here's Wachusett Slope. Okay, I'm gonna end it there.
Yes. One of the things, so you end on Wachusett with a lot of the names of some of the people you've met in the course of your walk so far. And that's one of the things I really have been enjoying about Six Walks is, and also have been a little bit amazed by, is how many kind of complete strangers you meet that are willing to, you know, to take you in and like let you, you know, stay at their house, or they're willing to give you a boat ride where you need to go, and just how kind of incredible that is.
Yeah, it's I mean, the thing about this book is it's what I mean, it often gets, well, what do we think of when we think of the outdoors? I mean, when Thoreau went to Maine, or even walked from Concord to Wachusett Mountain, it was clearly far more rural. And when he walked up Cape Cod, one of my favorite sections of, or very, very, I mean, Thoreau's a really funny writer sometimes. And in the Cape Cod section, he stays at this old Yankees house, who's so old he was a teenager during the American Revolution. He remembers hearing cannon fire echoing across from Boston to the Cape. And as Thoreau slept at his house in Wellfleet, and the next morning he wakes up and the man's making him donuts and fried eels, and the man is talking to Thoreau, and he has a big wad of tobacco in his mouth, and as he is talking to him, as the man is talking to Thoreau, he keeps spitting into the fire, but it's missing the fire and going into the pan where all the breakfast is cooking, and so it's like sizzling in his own spit. And Thoreau, it's like right out of Bill Bryson. Anyway, Thoreau's very kind and just eats the fried eel anyway that is stewing in this old man's tobacco flavored spit. Okay, but the question was about meeting all these people. Yeah, Six Walks isn't very much about wilderness, is it? I mean, it is in a way, but it often is about the people filtering through the landscape, because that's what is New England now. Um, and I think it's really important to just accept and be clear, and try to describe what is Wachusett Mountain now, and not try to avoid that there's a parking lot on top of it, or that when you walk along Cape Cod, it's not the ends of the earth, as Thoreau described. It's a tourist destination. And that Mount Katahdin, when I got to the top of Mount Katahdin, people were really angry that they couldn't get cell service. So it's a different place. But yeah, everybody was really nice, and I just reached out, and they reached back.
Were you always drawn to Henry David Thoreau? I was trying to think, and I don't think I've read anything by Thoreau since high school. That's kind of where my impression of him is stuck.
Mhm. Yeah.
So were you always a fan of Thoreau?
Oh no, I really hated Thoreau in high school. I think like most people, it just seems like homework. And I actually think most high school teachers, I don't know when this started, but should stop assigning civil disobedience in Walden. And it's just not a book for somebody who's 16 or 17, I don't think. I found my love of Thoreau in a kind of like a back door of his writing, which was his journal entries. And Thoreau was so young when he died. I had so many misconceptions about him, and anybody who's a Thoreauvian or loves Thoreau knows this, but he's 44 when he died. He was just this like searching, dear, sometimes fallible 30-something-year-old that by the end kind of reminded me of a millennial. Like he's living in a world that he feels morally opposed to in many ways, and he's trying to do his best, and he has questions, he doesn't always get the right answers, but it's like he's asking the right questions, and he's observing. And so I had, how I got it, I described this in the book, but I had a really bad hand injury and was recovering at home. I'd amputated the top of my finger off, and I was recovering at home, and I was on so many painkillers. I couldn't I couldn't pay attention long enough to read a novel. My parents at their house don't have internet, so there's no internet, and the TV was just gave me headaches. So I picked up a book on my bedside table, which was Thoreau's journals, 1837 to 61, edited by Damien Searles, and I read a line of the most beautiful line of snow on a field out his window that I had read, and I thought, wow, well, I just found the best line in the book. And then I turned the page and I read another extremely beautiful line about crickets singing in the morning, and I thought, my God, like what is this? And it's embarrassing, because it's like listening to Mozart for the first time and telling everybody, like, you got to listen to this composer, he's really good. It's like, yeah, we all know he's the best. But yeah, so then I kept reading his journal entries, and then read Cape Cod, and then read Maine Woods, and eased into it. I think everybody in high school should read, if they're going to read Thoreau, should read his journals. They're so much more relatable. Yeah, because the thing that he's writing about isn't some distant religious, political, social, cultural movement. It's not the Renaissance. It's not like, royal dynasties. It's out every Massachusetts school child's window. It's like, what happens when what young leaves look like on a tree in April or May. Like, it's right outside our window.
There's a line in your book that's really stuck with me. You describe the past is a verb. You said it's a feeling that comes through participation, not standing in front of a monument. Could you talk to that for a bit? That's just such an interesting idea to me. The past as a verb.
I was trying to, I guess I was trying to address that feeling that everybody has when it's like you try to get a strong emotion by visiting like a sacred place, or a place that's supposed to lend you some sort of like feeling, standing in front of a monument, or And the example they used was years ago. I did Civil War reenacting, and I had also, like, I'd gone to Gettysburg when I was younger and stood in front of the monuments, and everybody took pictures, and you read the lines, and then I did the reenacting, and there's moments in civil reenacting that happens after the battles themselves, after the reenactments, when you're in the camp and there's just an ocean of canvas tents and everybody's dressed like the past, like in their brogans and in their jackets, and the buttons are still warm from the sun that day, and there's like the sound of a fiddle being tuned and smoke rising up from, and it just, all of a sudden, it's not like a moment you're commemorating or a person you're commemorating. It's an action of living that can give you chills, right? And it doesn't mean that everybody has to reenact the past, but what I think it did mean is, like, there's this realization that happened simultaneously that Thoreau, I always thought Thoreau or Emerson or whomever, Socrates, you know, they're old fashioned, right? Like, they're old fashioned. We can't relate to them. But the thing is, they're not old fashioned. They're just touching on issues that are timeless. And those timeless realizations, like lose your ego and you will be happier, or always question and observe your environment, can those are things that take participation to work. You can't just arrive somewhere and expect a download. It's probably a crisis that a lot of people are going through now. And so I think that's what I meant. And everybody feels this in much subtler ways, like sitting with friends at a candlelit table and having dinner will give you a sensation either of your own past or of the past, or make you feel connected to something, right? Listening to live music, walking through the woods. Um, it, yeah, like, to feel things, you need to participate in them, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
You
Yeah.
go back to the idea of kind of being a witness in the book a couple times. You described that. When you're with friends, they've kind of been a witness to different
Oh
parts
yeah.
of yourself, and yeah, that kind of that level of participation. um,
Yeah.
we have a question in the chat of you know you start the book in kind of a dark place with your first walk, and did the walks ultimately kind of help you out of that? Would you attribute to the walks, or to Henry David Thoreau's works?
Yeah, I wish I could find it here. I don't know where the quote is, but it's about from Thoreau, walking and feeling the shedding of the day, the village, his life, the relation. He often talks about that. And I think anybody who's gone for a long walk or who's gone into the woods feels that, like, you get the magic dust on you, when you leave a camping trip and you want to just like hold on to it, but then you have to go to work or get in the car, and it's just not the same. I think there's something about walking specifically at that pace, moving through the world at that pace, that connects us to a really ancient part of being a human. Like, it really what defines us in a lot of ways as human. Like, we stood up on 2 feet and then we started walking. And then we started thinking and migrating, and it's like the movements at that specific pace is such a essential part of our DNA, I think. And it's not exercise. Like, it's not about doing exercise. It's about walking and noticing and going at that pace. The other thing is this book, because it wasn't initially a book proposal, and because I just took walks and I encountered strangers, there really is something about not having a plan, about trying to present yourself to whether it's wilderness or strangers or your own sense of self as a stranger. Like, you just to try to be to both like shed and gain at the same time. Like, you want to put yourself through a season of identities, I guess. that helps you move out of a, you know, physical, you're moving physically, but you can move out of an emotionally hard place for sure. Um, yeah, I would have answered that question very differently years ago when I started the walks. I just wanted to walk because it felt so good to talk to people I've never met and sleep in maybe uncomfortable places and just write down, just observe and write down the world. I mean, I think people would be, it's like that great Marilyn Robinson quote. People, she says something along the lines of, you know, most people live extraordinary lives of which they record nothing. Um, and it's like once you start writing things down, whether it's journaling or putting in fiction or whatever it is, it's just you just like it's all of a sudden it's like filled, like so much happens in a day. So much happens in a day if you just start writing it down and looking at it and taking observations. And that is a lesson that Henry David Thoreau could give anybody. And one that I certainly took from him as well. I did notice that his walks, I mean, his brother, I'm not sure, I'm sure somebody who studied Thoreau more closely, and I'm not an academic or anything, I just started to love his works as like a fan, could tie that knot a little neater. But I just noticed, you know, he was so close to his brother, so close that when his brother died of tetanus and got lockjaw, Henry got psychosomatic lockjaw, and they thought he was going to starve. Like he was such an empath, and he was so just like racked with grief that and he started, some of his best walks came after that, or his most famous walks came after that. And I always wondered that if he was walking sort of out of a darker place too.
Catherine has a question in the chat, which I actually had as well. Jeff, given the collisions you have with kind of 21st century, you know, infrastructure and people, when you're trying to, you know, experience Thoreau's wilderness, why do you continue to follow those portions of his walk? Why not write your own experience without continuing to follow, you know, in Thoreau's footsteps?
I mean, part of it was just interesting to see what's there now, you know? And I'd always been uncomfortable. Well, for a while now, I've been uncomfortable with how we think about nature. And we have these like two big thoughts, at least in my world, there's two big thoughts. It's like, A, it's all dying and we're going through the great extinction. Climate change is coming for us. It's sad. The thing to think about nature is like, there's this great sadness, which is true, but that can be all encompassing. The other side is like, oh, if you want to get wilderness, you should go to Patagonia or LL Bean, get a backpack, fly to Glacier National Park, and like go on a trail written down, you know, and it's like really prepackaged. And even the White Mountains are a little bit like that. And so maybe I just have like a lack of imagination of where else to go. But I just love, it really wasn't an I didn't want to go out walking. I didn't want to like, again, there wasn't a proposal to like, by walking, I will experience some life-changing personal growth. You know, at the beginning of this book, I was living alone with an amputated finger at my parents' house. By the end of the book, like, I am expecting a daughter, you know, like my life changed so much in that period. And I found there was something, call it whatever you want, but there was something truly like magical. Every time I would take a Thoreau walk, every time I would just decide to follow this enigmatic person that I had like unexpectedly built a relationship with from 200 some odd years ago, something good happened and something good came of it. And I just didn't want to let go of that. And it was like following it was like having a ghost take you by the hand and just lead you and say like, don't worry where you're going, just follow me. When I was civil war reenacting, there's something about following, you know, like enacting that you want to like like escape your life, you know, like leave things behind. But with the Thoreau walks, it was more like I just had a very calm, wise person sort of like whispering in my ear to help me see the colors of my own life more vividly in the present. And I just didn't want to let that go, that connection to that person. This book is in many ways like less about nature and wilderness than it is about literature. It's about this very unique person's understanding and the gift that he gave all of us that I think still ripples through American literature in ways that we don't always recognize.
Yeah. And one of your walks is kind of your own personal experience because you kind of take Thoreau's advice to walk. Is it southeast or southwest?
Yeah, Southwest.
Southwest from your house, which I thought was kind of neat because it's almost a Thoreau walk that any of us could take if you just leave your house and start walking southwest.
No, I recommend everybody does that. It would, it's like, just think about where you'd go. I walked, I think 16 or 17 miles to a point where I couldn't walk anymore. I walked across the Massachusetts border to Rhode Island and this long peninsula, but I really felt like Bilbo Baggins. It was like, you just, you just step out your front door and you just start going and see what happens. It felt very Shire-like to me. I loved it. I absolutely loved that walk. And that was written in the time of the pandemic. So I was going to, actually, I was thinking I wanted to walk to Long Island, where Emerson had sent Thoreau to find Margaret Fuller's journal washed up on a beach, but nobody was heading to New York City in 2020. So yeah, I walked southwest.
Yeah, can you give us an idea of the timeline? Like, when was your first walk in relation to your last walk? Like, how many years passed?
It wasn't 10 years, as it was like, let me think. Oh man, you think I would have thought of this before? Because of the pandemic, I mean, maybe like a span of 5 years.
I completely understand. Time means like nothing anymore from the past 2 years. So
yeah,
I think messed with all of our perception of time passing.
Yeah, right.
We talked about this a bit, but you kind of talk about how much the landscapes have changed since Thoreau took these walks. I'm wondering, I guess, from a more like logistical standpoint, like, how did you figure out where he had walked? Like, did you map it out? Like, how did you?
Well, Cape Cod's pretty easy because there's not many, but that was also hard in its own ways because, after the Cape Cod National Seashore was protected, all the trees grew up, and when he was walking, there were no trees, it was just the plains, and so it was really hard to find the house where he had stayed and all of that, and I had to ask a bunch of people. But when I was going up, so the Allagash section, which is Thoreau's farthest north point, it's an island called Pillsbury Island. I was going to canoe up there with a friend. Thoreau took a friend, Edward, with him. So I took a friend, and they also had a guide, a Penobscot guide with them. And I looked at Google Maps. I compared them, because I think, as I remember at the time, the names were not the same that they are now. And I was comparing landforms, and then my friend and I got to this lake. We're trying to find this little island where Thoreau took shelter on this farthest north point. And I was comparing, look, it was night by the time we got there. I mean, this is 60 miles from the Canadian border. It's way, way, way up. There is no cell service up there. It's so beautiful, but really still, on the way up there, we almost ran into a black bear and a moose, which goes to show you how far out in the wilderness they are. And it was really difficult to match the landforms. It was getting dark. It was in the middle of the summer, so I mean, it was 9 p.m. and we're still looking and everything. And then we finally get to this island, and I paddled to the island, and there was just a sign that said Thoreau Camp. And my friend John said, well, I think we're here. And if I had just looked up the Allagash campsites, then I could have easily found where he had stayed, because clearly somebody had already done the research.
Incredible to land there anyway, though.
Yeah, I mean, I am proud of myself for finding that. I mean, we landed right under a sign that said Thoreau. Um, yeah, so the landscape is for sure. Um, that's how, and the other walks, let me think. I mean, Wachusett, I didn't walk from Concord like he did. There's just actually too many roads, too much suburbia. So yeah, some of them are really abbreviated. Yeah.
Yeah. I wondered if you had a sense of, well, I guess it's impossible to know, but if there was a walk that you felt would have been closest maybe to what Thoreau's experience of that walk would have been. Would it, do you think, be Pebbles Island, since it is still so remote?
Um, okay, well, I had to think about this question. I've had to think about this question more after writing the book. You know, how to compare my wilderness to, or the wilderness that we all experience now, to Thoreau's. And what I have come to see is Thoreau was a master of scale, right? Like his wilderness is about this big, usually. It's like an apple blossom. It's a cricket singing in the morning. It's frost on a window. It's very small, often, and really well observed and articulated. Cracks in an ice, a leaf floating down a river. It's not John Muir. It's not the Rocky Mountains. It's not the West. It's not the ocean. It's not Melville. It's, you know, it's very specifically small New England, which in one way means that it is all around us, that you don't need to go to northern Maine to experience it, that you can go 2 miles from the Mass Pike and experience it. And so, but in terms, I mean, like, there was a moment when I was on the first Cape Cod walk, and I think what really struck me, I said before, if that walk hadn't been full of so many like really wonderful moments, then I wouldn't have taken the others. And one of those wonderful moments was I'd spent the night at somebody's house. I walked over the dunes, sat in the sand. I seem to have sat in the sand a lot during those walks. I mean, it was anyway, and then a whale just breached the surface, and I just watched a whale sort of plowing the sea. There must have been some food item that it was moving through. And there's nobody around. Like, there's certain parts of the Cape, because of the entrances, that there's like large wings of the beach where there is nobody. And I could look all the way around. It was the exact same view probably, and it felt really close. And that whale felt like something Thoreau would have described. Yeah, I think that is probably it. Yeah, that first walk felt magical. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite of the 6 walks?
I mean, they're so different. A favorite that I have, do you have a favorite child? In that are like different. I really enjoyed. Really enjoyed going up to the Allagash. You know, that was just like fun and bizarre, and I had moved past that darker period. And then, of course, you know, taking ecstasy and sleeping on a mountain in October when Wachusett was just like an experience that I won't forget. And the last walk, which I returned to Cape Cod to, you know, as like the season ends of this Thoreau like tagging along, I went with my pregnant at the time fiance, and so it was, I realized that I just like didn't want to head out and sit down in the sand and watch a whale. You know, like the most exciting thing in my life was happening in this home space, engaging with this other person and sort of like feeling the humanity, which is another thing that anybody who reads Thoreau, also the most conspicuous absence is he writes about people, but you just wish you got a little bit more, right? Like you just wish he said, you like wish you got more bio, like more like of his thoughts about other people in ways that aren't so short or clipped or packaged in a way. I can't quite describe it, but so this was like this walk is a departure from Thoreau in very clear terms or simple terms. I guess the first part of the book would be walking away from home into the world. The second half of the book would be slowly walking and returning home into the world. So they're also different. Yeah.
Well, we have a great question in the chat from Joanne. And if anyone has questions, just pop them right in the chat. From your walks, what can you say about the benefits or lack thereof of speaking with strangers?
Benefits. Getting directions is great when you have no cell service or your phone's dead. Okay, well, I mean, I also address in the book, like as a white man, just walking through spaces that are not mine, that are private property, that are, you know, like feeling like I can sleep out on a mountain without being threatened. I think as I read in the book, I both was not threatening or threatened by the public, by strangers, as somebody might feel. And so I always thought there was a benefit to talk with strangers. Like I never felt there could something bad could come of it. And that's different from Thoreau as well, who like does not have good things to say about a lot of the strangers that he meets. But I just found it to be such a relief to, here's the thing, like when you go to another, I think when you go to another country, the great thing about it, or when you live in another place, is not that you are experiencing new things and sort of like filtering in experiences, but you get to present yourself to everybody around you as some fresh thing. Like, you know, you're not bogged down by your past, by whatever problems you have in your life. You get to stand like at the feet of a total blank slate, which is strangers, another country, a community you don't know. So I mean, I think that's really therapeutic to talk to strangers and talk to people. I mean, I think there's, you know, so many issues with everybody carrying an iPhone around now, but one of them is like asking directions and finding out that somebody, oh, how long have you lived here, what is your, you know, interacting with people. Or, you know, remember when in the 90s we all used to just like ask a stranger in Paris to take a photo of us because we don't have selfies, you know, like interacting with strangers created experiences. Yeah.
I'm wondering, you mentioned in the book when you're taking your first walk, you kind of you grab a notebook, but journaling and sketching hadn't really been, you know, a habit of yours at that point. Is that a habit you've kept up with since writing the book, journaling and sketching?
No, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed to write, keep a journal. It just seems like total ego. I think keeping a journal is fantastic and I encourage everybody to do it, but I just can't do it. I'm so like shy to write down my thoughts of the day and just bore myself to tears. But that's why I felt it was so satisfying to take on somebody else's habits, to sketch, to, you know, I grew up in a generational family of painters. You know, there's a right behind me in the house, there's a painting from a Hudson River School painter, Aaron Draper Shattuck, who's a distant relative. My dad's a painter, my great uncle's a painter in southern France. Everybody's been painters. And when I grew up doing my homework on the floor of my dad's painting studio, it was all oil paints, it was turpentines, it was really a very not a spontaneous process, like very particular. And he has, anybody in Massachusetts, he has a beautiful show at the New Bedford Whaling Museum right now, Bill Shattuck, of landscape paintings at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, which is the best whaling museum in America, I think. And everybody should go see it. So I never sketched either, but I liked drawing, you know, and some of these are done from sketches on the trail, some of them are finished on the trail, some of them from photographs, some of them are just from my, you know, memory. I've always thought in terms of images, you know, and maybe that's from being in my dad's studio where, you know, by middle school, I understood negative space, perspective, foreground, middle ground, background, because it just was the thing that was happening in the house at all times. So I just constantly, that's how I write. I rethink of the image and then I write it down. And so drawing from memory is very easy as well. But yeah, no, I don't do it anymore to answer your question. Just one time.
I have a million journals I've started and they have remained empty after the first page. So I completely
Well,
understand.
I mean, like, I would love to get, you know, I would love to be on a panel of people who talk about journaling. And the question is not like, not do you journal, but why would you journal? Um, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, we have a question in the chat. Where can we get your book? It sounds fascinating, they said. And it is, I can vouch, it is fascinating.
You can get my book wherever. You can get it. You can get it at my bookstore down in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. I own a general store, the bookstore in it, Duvall's General Store, oldest general store in America, 1793. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, any independent bookstore out there. You know, it's been doing great. The book, I think it was a bestseller in New England a couple weeks ago, and so it's everywhere.
We have a question. Are more walks in your future? Would you consider following walks of the Hudson River School painters in New England?
Oh my gosh, it's such a good question. I have thought about that. I mean, Thoreau is such a famous walker that it's a little bit easier that if you say you followed a walk of Bierstadt, people would, you know, did you walk to some, or like Thomas Cole, would you like walked to a place and then you sat there for 10 hours to make a page? Like, what would you exactly do and how would you write about it? But I don't know if walking is in the future, but I think that model of following people from the past gives endless gifts. You can do anything with that. I mean, something. So my whole life after graduating college was painting. You know, just showing in galleries, painting still lives, painting landscapes, painting. And I lived in Norway and studied with a figure painter there. And anyway, I thought my life was going to be painting, and writing has just eclipsed that almost totally. And I really miss painting because, you know, like I run to the painting studio and I like drag my feet to the writing desk. Writing is so hard and it's like so painful most of the time. And it's like such a, what is it that for everybody? I mean, it's like so hard to start, and it's like, oh gosh, it's not very nice. Anyway, I was thinking, man, you know what I would love to do is just start. I would love to give myself a a painting project. So I would force myself to paint. So maybe the Hudson River School is a good idea. Maybe I could go back to where my Hudson River School relative back in the 1800s painted and paint all those scenes or something. But yeah, in terms of following somebody and writing about it again, I mean, it's just like, it already puts a knot in my stomach. I need to go on to the next project. And I will. Next year, I'll have a book of short stories out.
Oh,
Next
wonderful.
winter. Yeah.
Look forward to.
Yeah.
I was curious for Six Walks. So much of your writing, it does have quite like a lovely poetic kind of strain through it. I'm wondering if did you feel inspired by Thoreau's way of writing in writing Six Walks, or?
Yeah, I mean, I said at the beginning, the nice thing about writing in the shadow of Thoreau is like, I'm just never going to write a better line. You know, I can't, well, something that I still like to do, and I encourage anybody to do this if they get the journals, is just follow the days. You know, what is today, July 14th? Like, go to his journal entry on July 14th, 1848, and see what he wrote. I'm like one of those. I was doing a reading at the Nantucket Book Festival, and I just read the entry of that morning in the 1850s, and the opening line was, the sound of the crickets in the morning is a sound of the earth still dreaming. And it's like so beautiful. And that is such a Thoreau line, to use that word still. Like there's something about crickets that like hold the night, it's like it's dragging the night, like the dream into the morning. And comparing dreaming and the sound, and Thoreau is brilliant at creating a relationship, or like making the human experience something that can be very closely tied to it, and a natural experience. So yeah, anyway, I was inspired, and also I was like off the hook, because I wouldn't write a line like that. But yeah, any writer will tell you this, I'm sure. You do your best writing when you're immersed in reading, and that is definitely the case. It was just, okay, I guess I have to read these 100 pages of Thoreau if I'm going to write about Maine, and then just get lost in his description of what the side of a trout looks like, and sort of be like amazed by it. Yeah.
We have one last, it's a brief question in the chat. Have you recovered from Lyme disease? Earlier, Bach, in your book, you are struggling with the effects of Lyme disease.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I took 3 months of antibiotics. That was, I don't know if the Lyme disease is worse or that, but that was bad. And then I took a lot of stevia, and yeah, anybody in Massachusetts could talk to you for a very long time about Lyme disease. But there are a couple things, there are a couple like books that I could have written from this, and one of those books could have been more engaged with climate change, with changes in the environment, with what we've lost, what we've gained, development. I shied away from that for really specific reasons. But I think if anybody, like, I think most people have trouble connecting to climate change, because we're constantly seeing images that we have no relationship to, like icebergs. It's a landscape that most people haven't visited, and that actually like means death for most humanity, and is like an abstract form of landscape. And it's just not the right image, even though it is the factual image, to create emotion about landscape, I think. But something that like anybody who lives in Massachusetts, Connecticut, whatever, all of New England can feel is like, if you are my age, if you're anywhere over 35 or something, you remember as a kid lying in fields watching fireflies. You would never do that now because of Lyme disease and tick-borne illnesses. And that is a factor. There's all these statistics coming out about how warm the winters are, then the tick larvae survive through the winters, and then why there's so many ticks, and then there's changing the environment, there's so many deer, so many rodents, and everything. It's like, there is an example of how our changing climate and changing landscape has affected everybody's life. But yeah, if you have Lyme disease, I hope you recover from it. It's yeah, it's scary for sure.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of Thoreau's kind of observations of weather and nature have been used by environmentalists to kind of help measure climate
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. I mean, I think that's something that all the artists and writers in the world have to figure out. I don't know how to like generate the right emotions to enact change, instead of just seeing the facts as images that are hard to connect to, or images of a future that is hard to connect to. But anyway, somebody else's book.
All right. Well, we're getting thanks in the chat. Judy says this has been outstanding. And I just want to thank you, Ben, for joining us. I encourage everyone to pick up Six Walks. It's a fascinating book. And, maybe take a walk southwest of your house. It's southwest.
Southwest. That's Thoreau's favorite direction to walk. The future lies that way. I will say also, if you do, I really encourage people to get that edited Damien Searle's journals, 1837 to 61, and just follow along with the days. It's so fun. It goes a bunch of years, and you can see this young man trying to understand his world. And also, yeah, I think somebody asked, I do have signed copies at Duvall's General Store, which is my store, and you'll probably see me around there, and say hi if you come by, for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ben, and everyone have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Bye.